This is the PANACEA Field Test Builder. As you may be able to tell, there isn't a whole lot to it. The left-hand side of the window consists of the components that your hardware configuration is constructed with, as well as an LLA position. The middle of the window lists each of the objects you have added for the highlighted component on the left. These objects can be sorted in ascending or descending order by clicking on the column titles. You can also filter the list by typing in the search bar at the bottom. The right side of the window lists the actionable functions you can utilize for each component, which includes adding, copying, editing, removing, importing, and exporting. Let's take a moment to go over what each of these buttons do. The Add button generates a component builder pop-up for the component that you have selected on the left. The Copy button will make a copy of the object that you have selected in your object list. You must rename the copied object before it can be saved as a separate object. The Edit button will bring up the component builder for the selected object in your object list. The Remove button will remove the object that you have selected in your object list. The Import button allows you to import objects in a .pexp format. The Export button allows you to export objects in a .pexp format. To add an LLA position object, highlight LLA position on the left and click the Add button on the right. This generates a pop-up window known as the LLA Position Builder. You can enter a name, some notes, your latitude in degrees, your longitude in degrees, and your height above ellipsoid, or HAE altitude, in meters. When you're done filling out these fields, click Save. You can now see your new LLA position listed here in the middle. Now we will add some hardware objects that will make up our hardware configuration. The first component we will look at is GPS receivers. Highlight GPS receivers on the left and click the Add button on the right to bring up the receiver builder. Give your receiver a name, any notes you want associated with it, then click on the drop-down arrow in the receiver model box to reveal a list of all supported receivers. Scroll down or begin typing the name of your receiver to choose the receiver model that you will be using in your hardware setup. If you don't see your receiver model listed or are unsure of which one to choose, consider the message format it uses. The receiver builder includes generic receiver controllers for common message formats such as NMEA, ICD-153, MSID, and many others. Once you have chosen your receiver model, you can optionally fill out the part number, serial number, firmware version, PPS Switch port, and TIC port. The COM port or IP field is required, as it is how the software knows how to identify the specific device you are targeting. Enter either the COM port or IP address of your receiver. The COM port of your device can be found in your machine's device manager. When you have finished filling out the fields, click Save. You will now see your newly created receiver in your GPS receiver object list. The next hardware component we will go over is frequency counters. To add a frequency counter, highlight it on the left and click the Add button on the right to bring up the frequency counter builder. Give your device a name and any notes you wish to add. Currently, the only model supported is the Agilent 53230A, which can be purchased through TalentX. Enter the USB or IP address of your device. Hovering your cursor over the USB or IP address will reveal hover text that will help you enter your USB ID. Your device's IP address can be found in a similar fashion to the USB ID. Under I/O config on your device, choose LAN settings instead of USB settings to see your device's IP address. Now we need to set our channel impedance values. For PANACEA Field Test, channel 1 is typically connected to a truth receiver, and channel 2 is connected to receivers under test. In this case, we want both channels to be configured for high impedance, just like the default settings shown. If one of your channels are connected to a device that requires low impedance on its pulse measurement channel, use a value such as 50. When you have finished configuring your frequency counter, click Save. You can now see your newly created frequency counter in your frequency counters object list. Now we will take a look at PPS switches. The PPS switch will take measurements off of your receivers under test, which can be compared to a truth source to give you pulse error measurements. To add a PPS switch, highlight it on the left and click the Add button on the right to bring up the PPS Switch Builder. Currently, the only PPS switch supported in PANACEA field test is the URS 74016, which can be purchased through TalonX. Give your PPS switch a name and the COM port that your device is registered to. You can find the COM port of your device in your machine's device manager. Once you've filled out the fields, you can click Save. The PPS switch object you've just created will now be listed in your PPS switches object list. The last component we will add in is a signal hound, which will allow us to view the RF spectrum during a test. To add a signal hound, highlight it on the left and click the Add button on the right to bring up the signal hound builder. Now you can give your signal hound a name. The default settings in the signal hound builder are designed to look at the GPS L1 frequency, which most GNSS receivers use to produce a navigation solution. You can tweak these settings to fit your application, but we're going to leave them as they are for the purposes of this video. When you have all of your settings configured, click Save. You can now see your new Signal Hound object in your Signal Hounds object list. Now that we've added all of our hardware components, it's time to add a new hardware configuration. To do this, highlight Hardware Configurations on the left, then click the Add button on the right to bring up the Hardware Configuration Builder. Under Info, give your hardware configuration a name and any notes you wish to add. Under Timing, click on the drop-down arrows and choose the objects that we've just created. Under Spectrum, do the same. Looking to the right, under Units Under Test, we can see two boxes. One that gives us Available Units Under Test, and one that gives us Selected Units Under Test. All of the GPS receiver objects that you've created will appear in the Available box. To add them to the hardware configuration, click on their name in the Available box, then click on the arrow pointing towards the Selected box. To remove a GPS receiver from the hardware config, click on its name under the Selected box, then click on the arrow pointing towards the Available box. You can click and drag to highlight multiple receivers and move them as a group. Once you've added all of your hardware components, click Save. You can now see your new hardware configuration listed in your Hardware Configurations object list.